Nick, you ready to do another video?
Let's go for it.
All right. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the sub-tabs underneath the student account. Really important video. We can look up the student's information. We'll do that here. I should say the student's account. We created the sample parent and student account. So I'm going to click on the student's name to go to their account. And we're going to take a look at these sub-tabs. We're going to pretend like we've filled out all this great information. Can you pretend with me, Nick? Okay,
Gotcha.
yeah, we're going to pretend it all filled in. If you missed the video on editing the student's account, there's an earlier video that you can check out that addresses all of that. But right now, we're going to focus on these sub-tabs, a number of them. The first one is the work order. Work order is very simple and very important. So it might be SAT prep or algebra support or whatever that is, but here's a chance for us to capture what the concerns are of the parent, the history behind the issue, the objectives for success, what scheduling constraints there are, and any administrative issues.
So when would you fill out a work order again?
This, you know, at my education center, we fill out these work orders at the time that we're doing an intake with the client. Now, some companies will do the intake over the phone. Some will have them come in. I think it's a great opportunity to sit down with a client, get to know them. In many ways, I think that intake process is when you're educating your clients about your services and helping them to refer your services to other people. But it's during that intake process when we're defining what the work is. Now, I use this extensively, and I'm recording a lot of information during the intake, so I use the save draft function. That really gives me confidence that I'm not going to lose this at the end of if I lose my connection to the internet. And when I'm done, you just hit save, and it creates that work order that I can roll over and view. And this is really made available for the other administrators, but probably most importantly, the instructors that are going to be working with the student. In fact, I can go ahead and create a task here. We've talked about tasks before, but I can create a task and send it to a new instructor and say, this is the new student you're going to work with. Over here on the right-hand side, we've got this drop down, and I can download this task. I can download this work order as a PDF file. Okay, so work orders are important. And of course, this is a snapshot of what we're doing right now. We can create additional work orders in the future if we're doing, let's say, science support or something else with them. Now we're going to look at the session types. Session types are important because these are the billable events. These are the things that we're charging the client for. And when the instructor logs their session, if you have 20 different session types, then they can choose from 20 different sessions, and that introduces a chance for error. On the accounting side, that's a real problem. So what we want to do is have the opportunity to limit these errors by adding a session type to the student's account, like private tutoring. And what this is going to do by doing this, it's going to lock down the session type so the instructors can't choose the wrong ones. Now, if we don't put any instructor under here, at my education center, we don't put the instructor under here. This limits it for any instructor that's working with the student to private. Now, the reason why we have an instructor field is that you can actually put two session types called private and put different instructors. And why would we do that? Is because maybe you're using different override rates. Maybe you want to charge the client a certain rate when they work with instructor A and a different rate when they're working with instructor B. So you have that option. To keep it simple, I just lock it down to private. They will be billed at the default private session type rate, which we define under the admin tab. There's another video that we talk about setting up those customizations, including session types. But we also have the ability to use an override rate. And we can set an override rate for the late cancellation rate and the absence rate. Again, session types and these rates is talked about in another video. Main idea, we can lock this down to private sessions. Now they've only got one session type, we can't make a mistake. If we added two session types here, like private and SAT prep, then they can only choose between two. We really limited the instructor's possibility of making a mistake. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at session credits. So session credits is used for prepayment. Now we're going to talk about payment system later, and we have a great way to do payment processing, which is pay as you go. And we're going to talk about that later. But the system is fully compatible with prepayment, post payment, and also pay as you go for each session. In fact, we also have the ability to do a subscription model where you're just charging the client a set amount every third, say the third on every third of the month going forward. It just charges them a regular amount. But right now we're going to talk about the prepayment credit. Prepayment credits is very useful for programs like SAT prep or prescriptive reading program. And what we can do is charge the client for a certain number of sessions. Let's say it's a 20-hour program. And we can define what the session type is. Let's say it's SAT. Now, if we have 20 hours of sessions that we're prepaying for SAT, if we don't put an override rate here, it's just going to use the default SAT rate. Remember that default SAT rate is set up under the admin tab. We're going to talk about that later. Now, if I made this, let's go back and look at this session type again, and let's make this session type here. Let's make this an override rate of $50. Let's say the standard rate for private tutoring is $60, but this is at $50. Let's save that and go back to session credits. And let's say instead of SAT prep, we're going to be doing prepayment for private tutoring sessions. And we're not going to use an override price. Now the override price is for the total bundle of the 20 sessions. So if you were going to charge $600 or something like that, you could put $600 here. But if I don't put anything in here, what's going to happen, as long as invoice credit is checked, when I save this, first thing that happens is it creates this account ledger, which is going to document how the credits are being used over time, just like a bank register here. So I have for this current credits is 20, and down here it's going to show up the log of how these sessions are used, and also I can add credits or deduct credits. Now up in here under the approved tab, this is where we do our accounting, and we have an invoices section, and we'll see that sample parent is charged $1,000 for those 20 sessions, and it was billed at $50 an hour. That was the override rate that we had set up for them. Now, if we hadn't had an override rate, it would have used the rate that we had already set up under that admin tab. Let's go ahead and take a look at this where we go to session setup. This is how we set up our default rates, session type. And if we look up the private tutoring is normally at $60 an hour, but it charged the override rate of $50 an hour for those sessions because we didn't have that. Because we used the override on this when we attach that private type to that student account. Let's go back to their account. And I want to just review that really quickly again. So, once again, we locked down this student's account with a session type called private. The override rate was $50 an hour. We created a session credit, and when we did that, creating that session credit, we gave them 20 hours, and we did not use an override price here. So it used the price that we had set up in the session type to define that invoice.
Oh, so your override rate would apply to
The session
credit
credits.
accounts in addition to just regular sessions that you schedule.
Exactly right. And so we're going to show in a moment here how we use these credits and how they get deducted. In another video, we're going to be looking at scheduling, and we're going to be looking at logging sessions and the whole accounting feature. The main ideas though that we wanted to cover here was work order, locking down a session type, and the session credits. We will talk briefly about communication logs. Communication logs, if a parent calls in and talks about a particular student, you can log that conversation, create a message, and then save and email it to them. This is a really helpful feature, especially when you have a situation like there's a scheduled session on the calendar and a parent calls in to cancel the session, but then the other parent calls in the next day and says, no, we actually do want that session now. And then the session takes place, the student doesn't show up, and we charge them for it as an absent. Now, When the mom calls and says, "Why are you charging us for the absent?" and we don't know why that session was still there because she did talk to me and I thought we had canceled it. I have a record that the father called and said, "No, we actually do want that session." And by phone call with father regarding schedule and notes. So by having this and saving and email it, not only do we have that record, so when the mother calls back in, we can say, no, this is actually what had happened, that this administrator had spoken to your husband about the session. He called in that next day. The mother is understanding what's happening now. We're collecting payment. She feels sorry for the miscommunication. We're getting paid, and there's no problems there. So using these communication logs extensively for any communication that's happening, and you don't have to send out the email, but it's a nice way to give them a reminder or give them kind of a receipt of that conversation that took place. Okay. Any questions about the student's account and these main subtabs that we've gone over?
Not yet. I'm just glad to see that we have that ability to show accountability for all communications.
Perfect. Okay, so the next thing we're going to take a look at is how we do tutor matching if you're doing in-home or online, how we look at the schedule if your administrators are managing the calendars, and then how instructors log those sessions.